I welcome everyone to Talk Back. We're only less than 3 weeks away from November 5th, an election that some of us are calling the election of our lifetimes. But we seem to be saying this every 4 years now. And I'm so happy to have someone that we can talk to about it. Maybe Attorney General of the state of Connecticut, William Tong, can take me off the ledge and other people who are worrying about what's going to happen. So, of course, we have to introduce him as our advocate, whether he's our consumer advocate for energy, for the environment, for our reproductive freedoms, our voting rights. But I think the most important thing to talk about right now is our democracy. So tell me, Attorney General, is our democracy in trouble like you knew it was back 4 years ago?
It's in trouble, but we're going to be okay. So let me first say, Sheila, great to be with you, my favorite lawyer in Eastern Connecticut and my favorite talk show in Eastern Connecticut. I'm sorry, because it's just 3 weeks out, I couldn't find a good time to be with you in studio. So I'm in my car on my way to Bridgeport. I'm not driving. Don't worry about it. I'm on my headphones, and
Okay.
my assistant Tom is driving. But I wanted to make time for you and talk about these important issues. Here's what I can say. I think, look, this country's been in dark places before. In just a little perspective, this is not 1968. It's not 1860, and it's not 1941. And so, this country, our people together collectively, have faced incredible challenges and threats to our country and our democracy and our way of life and to our lives, frankly, more than we do now. And so I think we should all take a little deep breath and maybe lay off the extra shot of espresso in our lattes and understand that we're very lucky and we're very privileged to live in what has been for over 200 years the freest and in many cases the most prosperous and in still many cases the most powerful nation on earth in ever recorded history. However, that was the good news. The bad news is that, yes, these are unprecedented threats, and they're threats to our institutions and our rule of law. And that's why I think, Sheila, as lawyers, I think maybe this moment and the gravity of it, the weight of it, sometimes eludes or escapes people because, it's one thing to not want to get drafted and potentially lose your life in a war abroad, or to lose somebody, in Vietnam or World War II, or to see civil unrest, here in our country and in the streets in the South and on college campuses. That's very tangible and very real. But to talk about the crumbling of our institutions and our public institutions and private institutions and the rule of law is pretty abstract to people, but that's where we are. What people don't understand, I think, is that our democracy, our government, it's not self-executing. What does that mean? It means it doesn't just happen, right? There's no superseding powerful force that comes down with the hand and says you must do X, Y, and Z. That's not how the law works. Basically, our government, our democratic and constitutional system is one big honor system, and it depends on all of us to follow the rules. And if somebody like Donald Trump decides he doesn't want to follow the rules, you learn very quickly we don't necessarily always have a lot of answers for that. We don't have a lot of remedies for that. If somebody as powerful as the President of the United States decides, you know what, the heck with what the Constitution says, I don't feel like doing it. What are you gonna do about it? That's the challenge.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I think I thought growing up that one of the things that you expressed is we keep giving more rights. We keep expanding what rights means in Connecticut for all different groups. Only in the last 8 years, we've had situations through the Supreme Court and through the Trump administration where we have lost rights for the first time in our history.
Yes.
There's that. And then there's the other thought that I have is that no matter how much, if you're a Democrat, you didn't like the Republicans, you still knew that we stood for a constitutional order, the rule of law, and as you said, the I really didn't realize how much it depended on the good faith and cooperation and following norms that seemed to be broken. Talk about that. Talk about how you have attorney generals of other states in the country who are following the footsteps of uh, Donald Trump, and who are they violating all the norms and ethics by going along with the ideas to destroy the election, to overturn the vote of the people? How does
Yes.
that make you feel as an attorney general who needs to work with these people on the rule of law issues? I mean, I think that's what the breaking down of the norms, the rule of law, and the idea that the Constitution is effective no matter what. It's not, as you said.
Yeah, in many ways, the only word I can think of is it's heartbreaking. It's, yeah, sure, it's frustrating, it's wrong, they know better, all of that. But at the end of the day, as an American, as a colleague to my fellow attorneys general, and in many cases a friend, it's heartbreaking to see them compromise their oath and their duty to uphold the Constitution, and frankly their ethical duties. Not to make, you and I, Sheila, are under ethical duty not to make frivolous claims, right? Not to say things that just aren't true, and to
And how do you, yeah,
inject that into legal proceedings in the legal system, and to contort the law in such a way that makes it unrecognizable.
right. So, I know that 4 years ago you were involved in a lawsuit with other attorneys general um, because Trump was threatening the rule of law and trying to overturn that. I just saw there was an article by Neil Katyal, the very good constitutional lawyer and solicitor
Yes.
general,
Yes.
who said, "Watch out because the Trump people are planning to do similar things this year." Talk about that. What do
Yes.
we have to be cautionary about for November 5th and then into December and January 6th as the votes are counted and as they are certified by the various states? What do we have to think about regarding that?
So I'm a Democrat, and I believe that Kamala Harris is the next president of the United States, and I believe she's going to win on November 5th. And then I also know on November 6th, all hell's going to break loose. And as a lawyer and as an attorney general, I can tell you we are ready. The Democratic attorneys general of this country are unified. We talk all the time. Our staffs are in close contact with each other. We are ready. But I don't know how this is going to hit us. Like any case, right? You know that something's probably going to happen. You don't know in what court, on what set of facts, under what law. You just don't know how it's going to happen, except that it's going to happen. It's going to happen in a lot of places. And so what I can tell you is that I am grateful that we have Democratic attorneys general in North Carolina, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, and in Nevada, and in Arizona. So we have a firewall, and we are ready for this fight, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is going to get ugly.
Well, uh, that's interesting. Are you worried about right now things that are happening before the election to try to diminish the voter rolls, to intimidate people at the ballot box as they come through, to
Yes.
tamper with the
Yes.
post office situation? I mean, how do we counter those things even
We're
before we get to election day? Because that's happening in many states. There are lawsuits now. I know lawyers like Mark Elias are helping out, and there's
Yes.
probably a whole cavalry of volunteer lawyers helping out to stop these movements to try to cut short the vote.
Yes, and just today, or was it yesterday, a Fulton County judge in Georgia said that this totally unworkable requirement that all ballots be hand counted has been stayed, and that they're not going to enforce that, at least according to this judge's order. We'll see what happens with legal proceedings as we move forward. Sure, I'm worried about all of that. And there are, as you said, a great many lawyers focused on all of these issues. Let me just take a step back, though, and say we can sit here and worry about hanging chads and all of that, or we can go out and try to win an election. And at the end of the day, it does me no good to, crawl up in the fetal position and worry about what might happen in Pennsylvania or Nevada by this bad actor or that bad actor. What I have to do, what we all have to do, is do everything we can to push, from my perspective, the Harris-Walz campaign to a victory, and to have it be convincing. And I know everybody thinks we're all going to win by a vote. I don't know. I'm not sure that that's true. I think if the reasons why I think she's going to win are valid, meaning people are tired of the chaos, centrist moderate Republicans are not going to vote for Donald Trump, or they're not going to show up. Our ground game counts for a percentage point or two in every jurisdiction in which we have a good ground game, and we have a much better ground game than the other side. And just her overall performance in this campaign and the unraveling of Donald Trump. That's what's scary, by the way. It's not only scary that he says what he says and believes what he believes, that he's going to go after political opponents, that he's going to deport 12 million people or 20 million people, whatever his number is, that he's going to be a dictator for a day. I think clearly this man is not well. And I'm sorry to your viewers who find my strong language objectionable. I just got to call it what it is. This is not Donald Trump of the art of the deal. This is not Donald Trump as a young man or even as a middle-aged man. This is not Donald Trump of 2016. This is not Donald Trump from The Apprentice. This person is unhinged. And that is a national security issue for the people of our country.
Well, I think psychiatrists for the rest of history will be trying to explain the hold that this person has over people that normally you would think are people of intelligence, of quality, of character, who are putting their lives on the line for him.
There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of anger, and I think people offer different conclusions. That it's cultural and it's tribal, or that it's social issues and the culture wars, or that it's economic dislocation, in the modern economy and how it chews people up and spits them out. It's all of those things.
Right.
And
let's talk for a second about the Electoral College, because Connecticut's considered a blue state. People are saying, well, we don't have to worry because Harris will win the state. But that's such a disincentive, isn't it, for people in the so-called blue states? As you said, it would be much better if there's a fight after November 5th for there to be a resounding victory, even in the popular vote, right? How do we, why don't you talk about, what do we do about the Electoral College? I know Connecticut has passed the vote to allow all states to automatically give their electoral votes to whoever wins the popular vote in the nation, right? But
Yes.
we don't have enough states for that yet. What are your thoughts about that? How do we incentivize people, even in Connecticut, in the blue states, to say your vote is just as important as all those 9 battleground states that's all we talk about every day?
Sheila, I know that on the margins, it's important that people not be complacent. I think on the margins, it's important that we get people energized and out there to vote. But if you're not paying attention and you don't have an incentive to vote in this election, there's nothing I say or do is going to get you to vote.
Yeah.
This is, everybody knows this is a bad one. And if you're at all a regular voter or an inclined voter, you know that. Let's think about polling too. It's up a point, down a point, up a point, down a point. How many people in this country have not made up their minds?
Yeah.
Not a lot, I don't think. You know, could people switch? I guess. But it seems pretty hard to imagine somebody who's inclined to vote for Trump is now going to vote for Harris. Or
Yeah.
somebody who's decided that Donald Trump is a threat to our country and is going to vote for Harris now decides, you know what, that Donald Trump isn't so bad. And I don't see it. I just don't. I think a lot of this election is cooked, and I think people are energized. They just reported yesterday that the first day of early voting in Georgia was crazy, the number of people that went out to vote. And we saw that. We've seen that, frankly, Sheila, since 16, 20, now 24, that there's been a lot of energy. 22, when we were supposed to get wiped out as Democrats, which didn't happen. The big red wave never materialized. So I don't want to be, I'm not trying to be overconfident, but I am realistic about it. People are really focused on this. And it's partly also the internet, right? And how much information everybody has. Everybody's an expert all of a sudden. Have you discovered that? Everyone's got an opinion. Because they have access to so much information, which is great, but everyone's, it's part of the reason why there's so much conspiracy and misinformation and disinformation is because there's so much information, period.
Yes, I was going to say the internet can be a good source if you know how to use it, but there is so much misinformation, disinformation, false stuff bandied about, and we don't seem to have the same journalistic standards that we used to have, especially on the internet. It's like the Wild West out there. And I know you're working talk about that because that's an important thing. The misinformation, the preying on people's fears that happens with, let's talk about X, Meta, and the social media. What are the things that you are doing to try and protect us from that?
So, a couple things. First of all, I've sued Meta, Instagram, Facebook, all one big company. Our focus is on consumer protection and protecting all of us from the harms of social media. The focus of this lawsuit investigation is about young people, but let's be honest, it's not just young people. The misinformation and disinformation out there, the disinformation dozen, as they were called during COVID, who put out all of these they put out all this information that cast doubt on science and on the efficacy of vaccines, the anti-vaxxer movement, and who try to sell products at the same time, right? Buy my book, buy my vitamins, drink bleach. I think that there's a great deal of misinformation, disinformation that targets adults, and it's very corrosive and it's very dangerous. In many ways, we're in a post-fact, post-truth world. I know that sounds kind of wonky and academic, but sure the heck feels that way, that people don't feel that they have an obligation to be truthful. That internal limiter, right, that always sort of restricted your ability to tell a lie. A lot of people are just like, man, that's my point of view. And you have to look any further than the vice presidential nominee in the Republican Party. J.D. Vance is a highly educated person, and he and his wife both, they owe their careers to the law school that they attended in New Haven, Connecticut. And he tries to pass himself off as not an elite. Give me a break. Yeah, sure, you came from a hard scrabble background, so did I, but you went to Yale Law School, you became a venture capitalist, that's how you met Peter Thiel. That's not how people in Middletown, Ohio live, okay? Or Appalachia, right? Or East Texas, or frankly the Naugatuck Valley, or Wyndham. So don't tell me that you don't know better, JD. You do.
Oh.
And to get out there and to refuse to answer the question whether Donald Trump won the race in 2020, why don't you just own it? if you're gonna sell your soul, why don't you just, hand it
Yeah,
over instead of trying to be cagey? Because being cagey shows that you're lying,
yeah.
and that is heartbreaking to me.
I
And
think that word that best describes J.D. Vance. I love this word for so many people. Craven, Craven.
Craven, Craven,
That's it.
Craven.
That's it.
And at what cost? At what cost? This
So
whole
then you have
thing,
go
Sheila.
ahead.
I would
Sorry.
say, like, I wrote this piece about the really disgusting slur that Haitian immigrants are eating cats and dogs, and I wrote a piece that expresses how I feel about that, because frankly, as an Asian American, since I was a kid, people would often say, "Oh, Chinese people in that restaurant over there, they eat cats and dogs," or William, in your parents' Chinese restaurant, do they serve cat meat? I mean, this is just this typical normal slur. Sheila, I bet your ancestors, your parents and grandparents, and probably you at times, have heard things like that about all of us, and so there was nothing new to me, but I wanted to say how ugly and disgusting it is, and how dangerous it is, because when you dehumanize people like that, you put them at risk for their safety, and that's how people get shot, because you make them so inhuman or unhuman that people feel privileged to hurt them. And then I said, I wonder if he knows whether his Indian wife and in-laws have ever been victims of that kind of
Amazing. Well, the
heinous
hypocrisy.
racism.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
hypocrisy. No. Yeah,
like,
hypocrisy
watch,
knows no bounds.
it
It
knows
doesn't
about
matter.
us. And Usha, like, what are you doing? But I can only conclude, which is why I don't think if we beat Donald Trump, when we beat Donald Trump, that this is over. We're not going to kill MAGA, because this is this has affected the Republican Party, and affected a big part of our society and electorate, and it's going to take a long time for people to come back to truth and reason, and engaging each other as fellow citizens and human beings.
I know, but let's face it. I don't know if it's 46, 47, 48% of the voting public enjoys listening to that stuff, is supporting it.
Yeah.
What is it? What kind of commentary is that on our educational system, our civic duty? I mean, isn't that sad?
It is sad. I'm sorry to tell you, Sheila, that people have been pretty awful to each other for a very long time. And it doesn't surprise me, because every day in my job, I try to
Okay.
stop people from taking advantage of other people. And
So a lot of the Trump defenders say, "Oh well, he's just joking. He's really not going to be a dictator on day one. He's really not going to take Adam Schiff and his other political enemies and throw them in jail on day one or day two. He's really not going to deport. Going to knock on your door and deport you without a hearing and so forth." Let's get clear. Is he going to? How can we have a society where somebody is saying he's going to deport 10, 20 million Americans right away? And I know how important immigration is to you. How can you unpack that issue and have people still vote for that?
in October of 2016, I also thought it was an act. Okay, October of 2016. A lot of people, I mean, I didn't vote for him, but I thought it was an act. But after January 20th of 2017, we saw it wasn't an act, and it wasn't funny. Children in cages, right, separated from their parents. The fall of Roe versus Wade. Okay, all of this is real. The dismantling of the Environmental Protection Agency. This is not hypothetical. It's not conjured up in some Democratic ivory tower, where We think of all the horrible things he could do and imagine them and see ghosts. These are not ghosts. These are real people. Stephen Miller is a real person. You know, Samuel Thomas, real people, and they intend to do great damage to the Republic. Did I lose you there, Sheila? I'm sorry if I
You lost,
audio.
yeah, we lost you for a second. I guess you got into
Okay.
a spot without transmission. Sure. Go
Well,
ahead.
no, just saying that they they've shown us who they are in the first 4 years, so we should have no doubt that this is not an act.
Okay. But there are guardrails. I mean, the other day, Bob Woodward published a new book called War, in which General Milley, who was the chief of generals in the Trump administration, out and out called Trump a fascist. Is that
Yes,
something we should agree on? Uh, do you think he is a fascist in the
yes,
way he's going about
yes,
talking about the
yes,
things he's going to do?
yes. But again, it's not something that we have to agree on. It's what he has said and what he has done. Okay, uh, he incited a violent, armed insurrection against the Congress of the United States to stop the certification of an election. He did not step in to protect the life of the then Vice President, Mike Pence. And folks, I'm sure there are people watching who object to what I'm saying. And I just want to say to them, Donald Trump is, by his own reckoning, a very smart and capable man. And he understands cause and effect. He understands the power of his words as, at that time, the president, and now a former president, and probably the most recognizable American today, frankly, across the globe. And so he knew what he was doing, and there can be no dispute that Donald Trump understood what the consequences would be of him calling for rebellion over the results of the last presidential election. He is now openly calling for it.
Right. No, there are so many people who are frustrated that there have been so many legitimate lawsuits, uh, criminal and civil, brought against Trump in the last few years. And still yet we wait for some level of accountability. We see delay, we see appeals, we see constant obstacles put in the way of finally getting these cases done. What can you tell us about whether this is normal for the judicial process and the way it winds its way through? We just always have to wait for that final appeal, that final delay tactic, and so forth. Give us some understanding from your point of view about what's happening with all these cases and why we have not yet really gotten one final feeling of, wow, he was held accountable.
It's normal if you have money and you can afford lawyers who throw everything they can in the path of prosecutors and judges to try to delay and compromise the integrity of a prosecution or a court case. It's also normal and entirely predictable if your own loyalists in the deep state are there fighting for you. Notice what I said there. He's always railing against the deep state,
Deep
right?
state, yeah.
That they're these bureaucrats embedded throughout government there to undermine him and the American people. Give me a break. It's his deep state. Okay? Now represented by a 6-3 majority on the U.S. Supreme Court. And Eileen Cannon in the United States District Court of Florida talk about deep state. These are people throwing blocks left and right for Donald Trump.
Terrible. So talk about this. Let's talk about the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court, whether it was the Dobbs case or the immunity case or the Chevron type case or so many other cases, has set in your mind, I'm sure, judicial decisions back a century almost. Talk about that and how it's impacting the decisions in this election as well.
These decisions, again, as we've discussed today, are not academic. They have great impact on our everyday lives and on who we are as a country, and how we protect people and keep them safe. The Chevron decision, okay? People, when that came out, people were sort of like, what's this whole thing about Chevron? Isn't that an oil company? And this is like about administrative law and deference to federal agencies, and oh my head, like I have a headache already. And so journalists would ask me, what case or market or industry does this Chevron case really affect? What is it impact? And my response was everything.
Everything.
Look around your office right now, your studio, whether, your computer and the electronics inside it are safe for your use, and don't combust, the lithium ion battery that powers your laptop, right? Whether the bottle of water you have over there is safe for you to consume, whether the water coming out of your tap is safe for you to consume, whether when you go out for lunch, Sheila, the air that we breathe is safe to breathe, whether the products, every product in your household, the cleaning products, whether those are safe. All of it is impacted by Chevron, because what we used to believe in this country, and I still believe, is that Congress writes laws, but by necessity, they write broad policy pronouncements like water shall be clean and suitable for drinking. Okay? Now, Congress can't possibly anticipate every way in which water may be compromised. When they wrote the Clean Water Act, they didn't know about PFAS, PFAS. They don't know how many parts per trillion you could tolerate of PFAS in our water. They can't possibly list out in detail what everybody must do to ensure clean water. It's just impossible, scientifically impossible, because they're not scientists. So what they do is they say, you must have clean water. And then the EPA says, here's what that means. And they use scientists to define, and experts, what it means. How many parts per trillion, right, in baby food of lead and arsenic can we tolerate? Okay, it would surprise you to know that baby food is not pure. There's a level of contaminant in everything, including baby food, because it comes from the environment, right? Plants and meat and water. So if you don't trust regulatory agencies, then we've got a real problem, because they're the ones that make the rules. And what Chevron says is, no longer do we trust federal agencies. Either Congress has to be explicit about every little detail that they're not qualified, by the way, to pass judgment on, or we're going to fight about it every time there's a regulation. So every time we say baby food applesauce needs to have these requirements in order to be safe, there's going to be a huge knockdown, drag out, and going to paralyze our regulatory system in this country, and we are going to be paralyzed in our ability to keep people safe. How many bolts go in a door for a plane made by Boeing? The FAA decides that. If we don't trust the FAA, now we're going to have a huge fight about it. Industry's going to fight about it every time a new product or regulation is enacted.
Right. The Supreme Court wants to take away the congressional right to assign our important agencies with expert advice as to
It's
how
even
to.
worse than that. It's even worse than that. And what they say is not only can Congress no longer delegate that authority to agencies, but they say,
Right.
you know who's best equipped to make those judgments? Not Congress, not the agencies, courts.
The courts.
Now that's totally nuts, right?
Right.
Because there's no federal judge, I am sure, in this country who is more qualified than a PhD from Yale in water safety and water quality to tell me how many parts per trillion of PFAS we can tolerate in our water.
Right.
Not a single judge.
But sadly, some people like that judgment because they say, there are just too many regulations. If I want to start a business or do something, I've got to go through a million hoops, and that's not fair. But they're missing the point, aren't they, as to the importance of that decision. Streamlining regulations is a different thing.
I wonder how unfair they'll think it is when they get sick drinking tainted orange juice.
Yeah. The other important thing is...
There's a massive recall now of deli meat for Listeria.
Oh, really? Jelly beans.
I like deli meat.
Watch out for Halloween. Bad jelly beans for Halloween. We got to watch out.
Come on.
Yeah. Another important thing, they talk about this project 2025, which was the Heritage Foundation doing a lot of work preparing for a subsequent Trump term. He disavows it, but we all know those are his people and those are his ideas. So talk about the idea of getting rid of the civil service bureaucracy, the people that work for the United States, regardless of party, who have their loyalty to the Constitution, to the work that they do for us day to day, regardless of who wins the elections. Trump wants to fire them all and make everyone that's hired loyal to him. Talk about how dangerous that would be.
That's the very definition of fascism.
Right.
I mean, there's no better illustration or definition of fascism than that, right? Basically saying the heck with the rules, the heck with the guardrails. The powerful will govern and rule according to their own values and the rules that they lay down, and that if you're not with us, we're going to hurt you and we're going to punish you, and maybe we'll put you in jail, maybe we'll kill you.
Right. The other important issue that resulted from a Supreme Court decision, the Dobbs, taking away Roe versus Wade. Talk about the importance of that issue on a nationwide standpoint, because some women in Connecticut may say, well, our legislature is pretty good. We passed a law codifying Roe versus Wade. I feel safe in Connecticut. Why is that wrong? Why are we all really threatened by what could happen nationwide? And I know you've done some work on mifepristone and that case, and talk about that issue and how important it is to vote based on that.
Because even though we're very lucky to live in the state of Connecticut, we are part of an integrated market, not just of goods and services, but of people. People move in and out of states all the time for work, for education, for life. And so, number one, just because you're here today doesn't mean you won't be somewhere else tomorrow, number one. Number two is, just because your daughter goes to high school today in Norwich or Wyndham or Putnam doesn't mean she won't go to the University of Texas, next year, a year from now, or that your wife, who, has a sales job, isn't going to be on a plane, and if she needs emergency health care when she's in Alabama, good luck. So, number one, we're interconnected. Number two, they're trying to ban abortion on a national basis, folks. Okay? This is not just about the prerogative of the state of Connecticut. A ban on mifepristone, which is what they tried to do in Texas federal court, is effectively a ban on abortion. Why? Mifepristone is one half of the drug regimen you take, the medicine you take for a medication abortion. Half of all abortions in this country are medication abortions. It is nothing if not a national ban on abortion if you ban mifepristone. And so that's why I was in this fight, and that fight rages and continues. But because I went into federal court in Washington State with my Democratic colleagues, we have an injunction, meaning a court order that says that mifepristone has to be safe, legal, and accessible in Connecticut and 17 other states, and it remains so. But if you think that the fall of Roe was the end of this battle, you're wrong. It was just the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And now my colleague Ken Paxton is trying to get access to women's healthcare records to see in Texas if they're trying to get an abortion or look for an abortion elsewhere. I mean, it's totally bonkers. And so they're going to come for us, for patients, for doctors, for nurses who have anything to do with abortion, particularly anything to do with anybody related to Texas. And it's just unrealistic to say that we can wall ourselves off from the rest of the world. That's just not how life works.
And how important it is that over the years, I feel our Democratic friends have failed to put an importance on the Supreme Court as an issue in the elections. And the Republicans did it. And frankly, they won out, didn't they? Look what they have, a 6-3 majority on the court now. And God forbid Trump gets reelected, they could be even more. So talk about the importance of your vote when it comes to the Supreme Court. And again, comment on that immunity decision. What does it do for the rule of law? I thought no one is above the law in America. Didn't the Supreme Court make a president? Didn't they write that decision specifically with Trump in mind and his cases? That's what it seemed to read like to me.
Well, and to the extent that the reports are true that John Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts, is like depressed that everybody's so angry at him and doesn't understand why he did what he did, and that he was trying to write a decision that was agnostic as to who the president is, and it was, sort of based on principle. Like, I'm sorry, you don't get a pass. You don't get to sit in your ivory tower, right, and come up with some academic paper that you think can be applied to all presidents. You're looking at an existential threat to the republic. His name is Donald Trump, and you wrote this decision for Donald Trump, whether you like it or not. And the way this works, Sheila, is he said that a president has absolute immunity for core constitutional powers. Where is that defined in the Constitution? The answer is nowhere. Okay? So courts are going to make it up, meaning this Supreme Court's going to make it up. Okay? You get presumed immunity for your official acts. What does that mean? So if you believe that your opponent is a threat to the national security of our country and you lock him or her up, are you entitled to immunity for that? Or God forbid, you try to take them out? It's a mess. It's a total mess, Sheila. And, in your previous comment, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to get in trouble in saying things about Democratic presidents and Supreme Court justices and the decisions that they did or did not make. But you're right. There were failures. There were failures to take it seriously. There was arrogance about the Supreme Court and our institutions, meaning we didn't worry it too much. We thought that our institutions were durable and strong and that they would hold. And we failed to put Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court. And we failed to anticipate people's retirements and their untimely passing, and here's where we are.
I know. Any good news on the horizon? What are you working on now that you think is going to bring some help to Connecticut? Some of the cases that you're involved in.
So the good news is good news on bad news, which is that we're protecting people right now. We're very focused on scams related to solar power, and I think the word is getting out there to people: be careful about solar. If you're interested in solar, great, but be thoughtful. Don't rush. Take your time. Know what you're getting into. Read the fine print. Know the financial arrangements that you're getting into. So that's been very positive. We're talking a lot about social media and the harms to young people in particular. We're not just suing, but we're getting out there and informing people about how dangerous social media can be, how schools, frankly, need to do a better job, and parents of keeping devices out of the classroom. So a lot of positive movement there. Even though electricity prices have gone up precipitously, they are coming down now, and we are fighting tooth and nail against absurd, unreasonable requests for increases on our electricity rates and our gas rates. And so the good news there is that the Attorney General's office fights every single day for ratepayers, and we've been successful in stopping hundreds of millions of dollars in rate increases that the utilities want from us. So lots of good work being done.
Okay, and I know you have a fairly new initiative regarding elder law, elder care, elder abuse, which is a monumental issue as we age, as we all live longer. There are so many with either financial scams or uh, domestic violence, physical abuse happening. Talk a little bit about that, protecting our elders.
So actually, since I became Attorney General, we've been really focused on this. Can you believe, Sheila, I've been Attorney General for 6 years already? It's kind
Right.
of, time flies. And I've been around the state talking about elder justice, the Elder Justice Hotline, which is something that I set up with the Elder Justice Coalition here in Connecticut. And just like letting people know that scams are out there, how to protect yourself from scams. The best way to protect yourself from a scam is not to get scammed in the first place. You know, don't pick up calls you don't recognize. Um, don't um, don't pay money over the phone. Oops, I went out there for a second.
Yeah.
And don't stay on the phone with people you don't know. Don't give out any more information than you have to give. And don't send money, gift cards, don't wire money. Know that scammers are out there and they're coming after all of us. And don't worry it too much. Don't lock yourself up in your home and be afraid. Just be sensible and know what you know, that nobody legitimate is going to call you on the phone and demand money. And if you think you owe money to the utility or to your town or tax collector, or you want to give money to a charity, great. Call them yourself. Don't respond to an email, a text, a phone call. Somebody calls and says, please give to Save the Children, and you want to give, say thank you, hang up the phone, and you call Save the Children yourself.
Right. That's all great advice, but we get so tempted. We're so much products of our technological gadgets. Even the older people are learning how to use them and are getting scammed on them, which is sad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I wanted to also talk about the fact that you are now the vice president, isn't that right, of the National Association of Attorneys General? And people say, well, every state has its own issues, and you are not the Attorney General for the country. Why is it important for you to be part of that national community? What kinds of things do you do? And how important is it that you are up there in leadership in that role?
So I'm vice president, and God willing, in December, I will become the president elect. Then you have to wait a year before I actually become president, but I'll be the president elect. And I have 50 billion reasons why it's important. When I became Attorney General, we had not recovered any money from the opioid and addiction industry to fund treatment and prevention and addiction science. Now, 6 years in, we've recovered more than $50 billion
Wow.
from the opioid and addiction industry. We're still fighting with the Sacklers and Purdue Pharma. And that's because I have a strong presence among my fellow attorneys general. I have strong relationships. And on my best days, we lead. We lead the states in fighting. For example, it was Connecticut that led the way in the fight against Purdue Pharma and the Sacklers. And so that doesn't happen if I don't coordinate with my fellow attorneys general. And it's not just Democrats, it's Republicans too. And if I don't step out there and build those relationships and form coalitions and act as a team, we don't win those big cases and big settlements.
Yeah, important. All right. In our remaining time, I want you to give us a pep talk. You have a wonderful story about your father actually writing to Richard Nixon when he was president, begging him to allow him to stay in the country when the visa had expired. And so, I mean, we harken back to somebody like Richard Nixon, who we think of as a crook, but who did the right thing when he resigned and followed all the kind of the norms that we don't expect someone like Donald Trump to follow now. So give us a pep talk about that, about the promise of this country still to come, and how stop worrying and get to work for November 5th.
Sheila, my grandmother's 100 years old. God
Wow,
bless her. And
wonderful.
she left China as a young woman. She got married basically to my grandfather on the run from the Japanese and from the communists at the time. And by the grace of God, they found their way to this country. And when I was a kid, I used to say that, my parents and grandparents are immigrants. And that some of the kids that I saw in the late 70s and early 80s coming from Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos, right, post Vietnam War, I would say those kids are refugees. And I'm the son of immigrants. But Sheila, uh, why the heck is my family here? Why is your family here?
Mm.
Okay, if most of us were running for our lives, right? At some point, and not that far removed, a generation or two, okay? Most of us, if things were so great back home, we would have stayed.
Right.
But the truth is, a lot of people, and my grandparents, like a lot of Holocaust survivors, picked up and ran for their lives during World War II and the war in the Pacific. And so I am nothing if not the grandson and son of refugees. And what's so beautiful about this country is that my story, while a nice story, and it's pretty good on the campaign trail, I'll acknowledge that, it's unremarkable in that so many people share this story. And then my parents owned a Chinese restaurant and they worked their fingers to the bone 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then I worked side by side with my parents in our Chinese restaurant, sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade. And in one generation, I went from my parents' Chinese restaurant to being the attorney general of this state. That is the promise of this country. It is real. I live it every single day.
Okay. And let's hope with your work that nothing will take that away from us, and we can continue to be the beacon of hope and the refuge for so many people. My
Yes.
family came from Ukraine in
Yes.
1923, and we
Yes.
all have a story like that, don't we?
Yes.
Yes.
We do.
So thank you in your travels. Where have you been traveling? Connecticut's a small state.
Oh, no, it's not that small, particularly on Friday afternoon. Uh, no, I'm in Bridgeport now.
Oh,
We
okay.
started our conversation in Hartford. I'm in Bridgeport now. I'm going to see my child protection lawyers in Bridgeport and to
Okay.
support them and as they protect Connecticut's children from child abuse. So
Okay,
that's
great. So it's
I'm on the
great to have
job.
you talking to us on the job always. Thank you, Attorney General William Tong, for helping protect us. And let's hope that you don't have to do too much work after November 5th, right? Let's hope
Thanks,
your
Sheila.
weight is low at that
Yeah.
point. And we're going to remind everyone, Attorney General, that this year we have early voting. October
Early voting.
21st is coming along. Please, everyone, vote on October 25th for early voting, and don't
October
forget how
21st.
important it is.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Safe travels. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone. See you next.